So we're back. We just finished Bodhisattva Medicine King. We're now on page 176 for chapter 24, the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound. We've only got 4 more chapters before we're finished with the 28th chapter, or the 28th chapter aspect of the OTT. So again, 3 important points we should hopefully get through this in this video. Point 1, if I don't talk too much. Point 1, concerning the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound represents the living beings of the 10 worlds. So the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound is all of us. That's the way you should be perceiving this as I continue reading, okay? All right. The word wonderful means inconceivable. Inconceivable means unfathomable. What is that? That's mystic. Okay, so the word wonderful means inconceivable. The word sound refers to the sounds uttered by all living beings, the voice of the wonderful law. So all living beings, the sounds that they make are all voices of the wonderful law, because they're all manifestations of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, even though they don't perceive that's the basis of their existence, or the basis of the existence of everything around them as well. Okay, so that's the truth of the middle way, right? So these are the wonderful sounds that are constantly present in the 3 existences. The 3 existences are the past, present, and future, right? So in the past, this has always been the case. It is the case right now in this moment of life. It will be the case in all future moments of life. There is no end to this. It's eternal, all right? It is pity and compassion that make it possible for wonderful sound to recognize and meet the various needs of the living beings by assuming various forms. So when we talk about Ganken Ogo deliberately creating the appropriate karma, we manifest the wisdom to perceive exactly how we need to behave. I don't know if that happens when it can only happen while we're in a manifest form, because outside of my mind, this mind and body, there is no Buddha. But my point is that something allows us to have the wisdom to express ourselves in each lifetime in a fundamental way that encourages others to emulate us and follow us on the path to Buddhahood. That's the whole idea, all right? And it's always been that way, and it will always continue to be that way. That's why we come out of quietude and manifest as Buddhas in our present form in an existence in the Saha world, filled with suffering and confusion. All right. So let me just go back and read that quickly then, and get to the payoff line, which is the last sentence. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound represents the living beings of the 10 worlds, everybody. And the word wonderful means inconceivable. You can't fathom it. It's mystic. The word sound refers to the sounds uttered by all living beings, the voice of the wonderful law. You don't perceive it as the voice of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, but it is. All the sounds you hear, all of the things in the phenomenal world are all expositions of the wonderful law. These are the wonderful sounds that are constantly present in the 3 existences, because Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the original state. Everything's a manifestation of it. It is pity and compassion that makes it possible for wonderful sound, the character from the Lotus Sutra that this chapter is about, to recognize and meet the various needs of living beings by assuming various forms, just as we do as bodhisattvas of the earth. This is what is expressed by bodhisattva. Okay, is our pity and compassion that make us remanifest in the Saha world and express whatever is expressed for the sake of the law. Whatever our life condition, whatever our experiential background, basis is, ethnicity, sex, country of origin, everything is determined by our desire to help others. Okay? Or again, says in the middle of this, middle page of page 176, or again, we may say that the words wonderful sound refer to the unfathomable. Again, he's saying unfathomable as in, mystic, like the mystic law is unfathomable. That's the region of the unfathomable is how that's expressed. and the wonderful sound made at the present time in the latter day of the law, when Nichiren and his followers now chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, because the key here is that while we qualify past, we really can't qualify it as Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, because Nam Myoho Renge Kyo was not revealed by anyone other than Nichiren in the 500-year period. But the essence of the law is still the governing factor for everything throughout the three existences, okay? And Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is for this period on earth, okay? There might be other worlds where they don't speak Chinese and Japanese and have different, the same language as we do. I don't know, but I'm just qualifying what he's saying here, where again we may say that the words wonderful sound refer to the unfathomable, because you can't figure this out. It's beyond the ability of the mind to understand or perceive infinity. And the wonderful sound made at the present time in the latter day of the law, when it can possibly be Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, when Nichiren and his followers now chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So I hope that was clear. Therefore, it is the wonderful sound that tells us that earthly desires are enlightenment and that the sufferings of birth and death are nirvana, so that no matter what we experience, by chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, we can turn any life condition or world that we may be in terms of the 9 worlds, we can make it the Buddha land. We can make our environment reflect the inner state of life that we possess. Buddhahood. Point 2 on page 176 is concerning the knob of flesh on the top of Shakyamuni Buddha's head and the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows. Now, if you read the Lotus Sutra and you realize that he's got this some sort of knob of flesh that's sticking off of the top of his head, I don't know how to even describe it, but that's how it's expressed. And then that tuft of white hair between his eyes, which, is like another metaphysical kind of extrapolation. Beams of light sometimes either come out of all of his pores or are projected through the illumination of all the 10 worlds in the outer realm of the universe, that he brings all these bodhisattvas and Buddhas in for the ceremony in the air. They were all illuminated for everybody to see at the ceremony, to be able to perceive and see all of these other worlds and all of the people, all of the inhabitants, all right? So he's qualifying, where in the hell does this weird, spooky shit come from about a knob of flesh and a tuft of white hair between his eyebrows? I don't got neither one. Does that mean I'm not qualified? No. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says these two auspicious features, because they're part of the 32 distinctive characteristics of the Buddha according to the sutras, derive from the fact that the bearer is filial. Okay, what's filial? It means respectful and filled with a sense of shame and self-reflective and giving gratitude constantly for everything around it. Okay, think of Bodhisattva never disparaging. Okay, these two auspicious features derive from the fact that the bearer is filial and obedient towards his teachers and elders. All right, it's being a good person. But to uphold the Lotus Sutra is the highest of all expressions of filial and supportive conduct. So you can go through this process of, as a human being, expressing a filial nature and respect for your elders. It doesn't compare to embracing the law of beginningless time, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and doing your best to propagate it in the Saha world to make everyone equal to yourself, now that you've understood and encountered it. Again, we may say that the tuft of white hair represents the sexual fluid of the father, because sex occurred. There was definitely some nanner going on. That's how we got born. That's why we're born into the world of desire, which is where the Saha world exists. The only place you can actually attain Buddhahood in your present form, not in the world of form or formlessness. All right, the threefold world. Again, we may say that the white tuft of hair represents the sexual fluid of the father, while the knob of flesh represents the sexual fluid of the mother, the egg, the womb. These two fluids, one red and one white, not to be too graphic, appear in the Lotus Sutra in the form of the two auspicious features, the knob of flesh and the tuft of hair. So this is really, again, about how we come in, how we manifest into the Saha world, okay? Or again, we may say that the knob of flesh represents the wisdom of the truth that functions in accordance with changing circumstances. What is that? That's the wisdom that comes from faith. That's the wisdom that comes from going on the path, from hearing the name and the words of the truth all the way to stage 6. Okay, that wisdom is constantly changing. That's the wisdom of chanting Daimoku to the Gohonzon and growing in your perspective and understanding of the truth of reality. Okay, while the tuft of white hair represents the principle of eternal and unchanging truth. It represents the Dharma realm. It represents the Dharma body. It represents Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It represents the original state. All right, everything manifests from non-substantiality. It's not the other way around. Okay, non-substantiality precedes temporary existence. Okay, and the truth of the middle way is the understanding that it's always that way. Okay, so we all came out of non-substantiality even from the beginningless time. We didn't just like suddenly appear in an environment where there were already worlds formed and everything else. No, because the three realms are part of the whole process of Ichinen Sanzen. Okay, so let me say it again. Or again, we may say that the knob of flesh represents the wisdom of the truth that functions in accordance with changing circumstances. That's always talking about the reward body, while the white tuft of hair represents the principle of eternal and unchanging truth. Now, Nichiren and his followers in their chanting of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are equipping themselves with these two auspicious features. Okay, we're equipping ourselves with the infinite enlightenment of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the original and the original state of Kuan, and that understanding which is beyond comprehension in other than metaphysical terms. And then again, the wisdom that accords, the wisdom of the truth that functions in accordance with changing circumstances, that continual progression that we have in the course of attaining Buddhahood in our present form. The red color that accompanies the time of our birth represents the knob of flesh, and the white bones that remain after our death represents the feature of the white tuft of hair. That our skeleton proves that we existed as an entity, right? There's no skeleton, there's no proof of existence. Okay, so that's what he's qualifying. That stays in the Saha world after you depart at what seems to be extinction but is not. The red color at the time of birth stands for the wisdom of the truth that functions in accordance with changing circumstances, because that's the growth of you as a living being. And the white bones that remain after death stand for the principle of eternal and unchanging truth, the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo that has existed and always continues to exist regardless of time. But this should be treated as secret. This should be treated as secret because, again, this explication by the Daishonin is only from the perspective of his own Buddhahood. That's where all of this is coming from. That's why we call it the record of the orally transmitted teachings. Point 3, don't get into a debate with a Zen person over this because they'll say, where did you get it? And that's supposed to be your argument. Okay. Point 3, concerning the 84,000 alms bowls made of the 7 treasures that were presented by Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound. And we know that those 7 treasures are the 7 treasures symbolically of the 7 conditions that I've referred to, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, that make us actually have senses. And but they're represented in the sutra by the treasure tower and the 7 jewels, right? So those are the 7 treasures. Point 3, concerning the 84,000 alms bowls made of the 7 treasures that were presented by the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound in homage to the Buddha. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says this passage describes the alms bowls presented by the Bodhisattva Wonderful Sound to the Buddha Cloud Thunder Sound King, which is who he was. This is a segment from, again, this is the 24th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. We've already all left in supernatural powers. Now, when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are in effect presenting 84,000 alms bowls to the Buddha of the three existences, the Buddha of beginningless time, all right? The Buddha of the original state. We're giving it to the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the aspect that is the manifestation of the Dharma realm. Everything, all right? So everything has as its core Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We're all clear on that, right? The number 84,000 stands for the 84,000 dust-like cares. Dust-like cares. So think about that when we were talking about for consternation and problems and sufferings and so forth and so on. The 84,000 stands for the 84,000 dust-like cares or delusions that beset us, all those worries, all that unnecessary stuff that enlightenment takes away because we perceive things as it actually is. It doesn't mean that we're not hungry when we need food, but it means we understand the reality that we're eternally endowed with the three bodies. This is just one lifetime out of many, and whatever we do, we can never disgrace the Gohonzon. To the very last moment of our life, we must reveal our innate nature of Buddhahood and the reality that anyone can become a Buddha in their present form by taking Nichiren as their teacher and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The number 84,000 stands for the 84,000 dust-like cares. They can just blow them away. They're nothing. They're not real. They're delusional. Okay? Or delusions. It says, or dust-like cares or delusions. They're the same thing. Dust-like cares are delusions that beset us as common mortals in the nine worlds when we're not, expressing the Buddha-like nature of chanting Daimoku. But when we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, he says, but when we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, these cares manifest themselves as the 84,000 gates to the law that is the teachings, because it's only through the sufferings of birth and death or nirvana. Okay, that's the whole idea of that expression of truth. Okay, the total number of characters, you got to be alive in order to express Buddhahood, or else you're just going to spend all your time in ku, and that's not a manifest state, and it's not as much fun as it might seem that it would be if you were a Theravadin. But we don't do nirvana. We don't get blown out and not exist anymore. We always do this over and over and over again because we're not just interested in our comfort, we're interested in the comfort of all others. Okay, so we got to remanifest continuously, eternally, so that we can bring everybody to the perception and understanding of the truth that they're eternally endowed with the three bodies, all living beings. We never stop until we get them all. The total number of characters in the Lotus Sutra, when it is combined with the introductory sutra, the immeasurable meaning sutra, and the concluding sutra, the universal worthy sutra, comes to 84,000. Again, we may say that the number 8 stands for the 8 sufferings. Okay, let me give you the 8 sufferings. We all know what the 4 sufferings are: birth, old age, sickness, and death, right? So hang on. I'm sorry, I'm so clumsy. I'm old. All right, the 8 sufferings are the other 4 are things you can relate to from your life in the phenomenal realm. So we understand the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death have to do with life and death in this state of existence. But it says the other 4 are sufferings from having to part from those one loves, because in that process of birth, old age, sickness, and death, there's going to be death that catches up with people that we love, and that we're going to feel a sense of loss from the fact that they've gone into ku, where we're headed right after them. Okay, the sufferings of having to meet with those whom one hates. I've got a few of those. The sufferings of being able to obtain what one desires. Okay, think of everything that you desire. Okay, and the suffering that arises from the 5 components that constitutes one's body and mind, not having the ability, the mental faculty to be born with, deprivation of mental faculty. There's such a thing as being born into the phenomenal realm and not having that work out for you. You have mental deficiencies, physical deficiencies, things like that. That's what the 4 sufferings are, in addition to birth, old age, sickness, and death. He says, while the number 4 stands for the sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and then he also said prior to that, we say the 8 stands for the 8 kinds of sufferings. The 7 treasures represent the 7 openings in the head, which are the functions that allow us to breathe, eat, hear, and speak, and see. An alms bowl is a vessel for holding wisdom, he says. You should understand that with this alms bowl, one accepts and upholds the water of wisdom that is the wonderful law. Our life itself is an alms bowl that we fill with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, ultimately. All right? An alms bowl is a beggar's bowl, right? That's how monks go and actually sustain their lives. They go around and look for people that will offer them restitution through money or food or shelter. Come and stay at my house tonight, whatever. Our alms bowl is the water of wisdom that is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the wonderful law. Okay, continuing on page 178, we're into the 25th chapter, chapter 25. The universal gateway of the Bodhisattva, perceiver of the world's sounds. 5 important points. And I can see from all the stars and all the heavy highlights here that this is going to be fun for me to read. Point 1, concerning the Bodhisattva, inexhaustible intent. Inexhaustible intent. That's endless compassion. All right? The record of the early transmitted teaching says the name inexhaustible intent, Mujini, stands for the perfect unification of the 3 truths. So the perfection of the middle way, the understanding of everything as it actually exists. The element mu, or not, represents the truth of non-substantiality, ku. The element jin, or exhaustible, represents the truth of temporary existence, because we only come in and we deal with the 4 sufferings of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and we go back into ku. Okay, so that's an in and out. And the element ni, or intent, which represents the truth of the middle way, which is the reality that we will constantly go through this process and have always gone through this process since beginningless time and continuing into the endless future. In the name perceiver of the world's sounds, Kanze-on, that's Kanon, we're talking about Kanon here, okay? In the name perceiver of the world's sounds, Kanze-on, the element kan, or perceiver, represents the truth of non-substantiality. The element ze, or world, represents the truth of temporary existence. And the element on, or sounds, represents the truth of the middle way. We understand truth of the middle way is the same as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo prior to the advent of the Daishonin in the 500-year period. This is what you did when you did the Makashikan. This is what you're focusing on with all of Tentai's clarifications, was to understand and perceive the truth of the middle way. So he's saying all these things represent the truth of the middle way, which is another way of saying the understanding of the wonderful law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the wonderful law of the simultaneity of cause and effect teaching, Myoho Renge-kyo. In the words Myoho Renge-kyo, or the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law, the element myo, or wonderful, represents the truth of non-substantiality. It's unfathomable. The element ho renge, or the lotus of the law, the simultaneity of cause and effect, represents the truth of temporary existence, because everything that we've experienced in manifest form is representative of that simultaneity of cause and effect. That's why we can chant and actually qualify or requalify the karmic state and experiential reality that we live in. Okay, that's how we turn, hell into the Buddha land. All right, represents the truth of temporary existence, and Kyo, or Sutra, represents the truth of the middle way, this perfection, this Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, that is the original state. In this chapter, the wonderful principle of the Dharma nature that is embodied in the 3 truths is expressed in the terms of the 3 truths of Bodhisattva, perceiver of the world's sounds, and the 3 truths of Bodhisattva, inexhaustible intent, because they all did non-substantiality, temporary existence, middle truth of the middle way, as their Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, if you will, wisdom, source of Buddha wisdom. Whereas we cut to the chase and just say Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. We don't have to go through a Makashikan seated meditation process of deriving this after, decades of trying. All right. Now, when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are acting as the inexhaustible intent of the latter age of the law, of the latter day of the law. We're bodhisattvas of the earth. We don't have to go through the processes that made these entities so few and far between, so special that they were looked at almost in a godlike praise kind of a way. None of that happens to us as normal human beings, but we have the same potential because we chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to be the same type of entity that is worthy of that kind of praise. Now, when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are acting as the inexhaustible intent of the latter day of the law. We manifest after the fifth 500-year period because we're disciples of Nichiren. Thus, we may say that the element, and don't forget, the Sahe world, the fifth 500-year period is the third of the latter day of the law, is 10,000 years and beyond. So it's pretty much inexhaustible. When thus we may say that the element mu in the name Mujini, or inexhaustible intent, is the sign of our death. The element Jin is the sign of our birth, and the element Ni, or E, is the root source of our life force. It's the original state. For this reason, all the various doctrines, as the doctrine of the fusion of reality and wisdom, which is Kyochi Myogo, that was what you were trying to achieve when you chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to the Gohonzon. You want to fuse with the Gohonzon, you want to attain enlightenment in your present form. That's what that was all about. Such as the doctrine of the fusion of wisdom and of reality and wisdom are contained in the single word E, or intent. That's the intent of all Buddhas. This intent represents the Dharma nature. Okay, the Dharma nature is the Dharma body, is the actual phenomenal realm. Everything is inseparable. It all has the same source and is perceived as such, or the truth of the middle way, or the middle way, the truth of the middle way. The Dharma nature represents Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Everything is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's the Dharma body that perceives everything is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. These 5 characters are the intent of the Lotus Sutra. So while the 28 chapters may not say everything that Daishonin is explicating in the record of the orally transmitted teachings, they are identical. One is for the former and the middle day of the law. The other one is for the latter day of the law. In terms of the 5 stages of development of the fetus in the womb, the character E, or intent, corresponds to the 5th stage, that of bodily form. Hence, the form of a being in the 5th stage corresponds to the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and space, which in letter to Abutsubo he qualifies as what the Gohonzon. Those are the 5 characteristics of the compounds that make up the Gohonzon as well. And the 5 elements in turn correspond to the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo. That's why he says that. These 5 characters are also expressed in the single character E, or intent. It's your ichinen to achieve that single moment of life where all of this becomes available to you. The intent or meaning of the Buddha is the 5 characters of Myoho Renge-kyo. That's how we reveal it. It is nothing but this. The intent of the Buddha is the Lotus Sutra. This is the good medicine described in the lifespan chapter, the good medicine favored by all the Buddhas of the 3 existences. All the countless phenomena of the 3,000 realms are nothing more than the single character E, or intent. This desire to attain the perfection of the truth of the middle way, this desire to become a Buddha in your present form through chanting the Daimoku and leading others to it. And so to have faith in this intent of the Buddha, I'll say it again, to have faith in this intent of the Buddha, which is really all that matters, because this is what qualifies what kind of life you actually led and what kind of karma you made in this lifetime, is what is meant by the mind of faith. So the mind of faith is the whole ball game. That's the intent to achieve what you took a vow that you would achieve. The element of mind has its various divisions or categories, but we are completely encompassed in the entirety of the wonderful law. Everything is the Dharma realm. And with that, I go to point 2. I'll end there for today, and we'll take it up from page 180 on point 2 of the Perceiver of the World Sounds chapter when we come back again next time. Thank you very much.